so, 1 year since the Usindiso Building Inferno. SERI Executive Director Nomzamo Zondo now joins us via video link to weigh in on the Usindiso Building fires today. Again, as I mentioned, just marks the anniversary of the tragedy. A very good afternoon to you, Nomzamo, and thank you for your time at this hour. I dare say good afternoon, given that justice delayed is justice denied, and some of the view that this was a tragedy waiting to happen. 1 year on, given what's transpired, what are your remarks about the manner in which the city's handled the outcomes since the Commission released its outcomes at large?
Look, I think it was firstly important for us to participate in the Commission process. And I think the fact that we had a report that gave a good foundation for justice for the victims, but also a change in the inner city. We had hoped that the city of Johannesburg would take it seriously and at least would then, of its own, start making interventions that look at fire safety in buildings, look at rolling out access to basic services, and also, of course, address the issue of where do people go if these buildings are completely unsafe or a risk to people's lives. How does it intervene? And unfortunately, we haven't seen any action in relation to that. But as part of the process of the second part of the Commission, there's been inspections where with the two commissioners, with the evidence leaders, with SERI and with city officials and the city representatives, and our client, the Inner City Federation. And in that process, we have clearly made recommendations that actually there should be interim interventions. There should be interim interventions that look at fire safety in buildings, that take steps, for instance, to make sure that the fire hydrants work, that in buildings where there's an issue in terms of exit and entryways, that those are widened to make sure that if there is a fire, people are able to escape easily. That we are saying there should be a rollout of basic services, not depending on who you are, who owns the building, but simply because people live there, there must be services, there must be a supply of services, even if it is interim services, like a standpipe to make sure that there's water in each floor in each building, like in making sure where there is infrastructure that there's electricity. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that response. And again, it might be that they're waiting for the Commission to recommend it, but we think it's obvious that this situation needs action now.
Well, speaking about following safety measures, perhaps even the necessary policy changes that needs to come as a result, just given that the city had been found to have not enforced, certain bylaws. I wonder the concerns at this point, just in terms of that tragedy or such incidences occurring again. A few days ago, there was the Jeffreys Town fire coming to the fore once again. We cannot be waiting for an emergency before such incidences are actually acted upon.
And that's the difficult thing, right? In terms of the law, the laws are clear. That's why the Commission could find
Yes.
the city had failed to enforce those laws. The policies are also clear that there is a fund in the emergency housing fund, which is run by National, which can support to make sure that there's an intervention makes sure that people are safe. And unfortunately, the question has been that the city has taken a position that it won't assist unless it's ordered by a court. In effect, late last year, after the Usindiso fire, they brought a number of court applications where they wanted to relocate people on the basis of the buildings that they're in and are unsafe. They were granted those orders. I think many of them were granted during the December period. But as we sit on the 31st of August, 2024, not a single one of those buildings has been relocated. So they've got court orders that say you must relocate residents to somewhere safer. But their position has been they've nowhere to relocate them to.
Now, speaking about addressing the concerns and the conditions for the survivors at large, what are the sentiments coming through from some of the survivors, some of whom don't really have closure? They haven't been able to bury their loved ones as well. What's emerging on that front as well?
Look, so as SERI, I think at the first point that we got to contact the victims, we had one request that came from them, which was a central coordinated place where they could get assistance. So that those who, for instance, say, I still haven't been able to find my loved one, can get support to do that. But in effect, we know that it's SABC who holds that as the investigating officers of the tragedy. On the other side, there's forensics. The city itself is really nowhere to be seen in terms of facilitating the engagement between victims and these groups. We know that the Commission had recommended trauma support. there is no one, even if you look at the city's own social development, who had been there immediately after the fire. There isn't a place where people can go to get that assistance. So I think one, a central coordination space would be great. Two, the Premier had promised us in May of this year that there would be a team that would oversee the implementation of the recommendations of the Usindiso Commission. That, again, that is still outstanding. At the very least, if that team exists, neither the victims or organizations like SERI and the Inner City Federation, who've been close to the commission's process, have been informed of who that team is and what that team is doing. There is, as one of the recommendations, a need to put up a plaque for all those victims whose names are known at the time the plaque is put up. But at this point, we're not even clear the city of Johannesburg, who has been given that responsibility, is aware of who the victims are, one, and is aware of where the process in terms of identifying the 17 victims that are now outstanding.
Because Nomzamo, some of the questions that remain unanswered, when and how should we be expecting, or what should we be expecting from the city itself in terms of a formal response going forward? Perhaps also where to from here? Class action against the city at large? Can you perhaps divulge any information on that front? And then also, just in terms of commemorating the day today, 1 year later, as we still await justice, how are those commemorations going to look like for everyone at large?
Thank you so much. So one, in terms of the getting justice for the victims, the Norton Rose Fulbright was on record in the Commission of Inquiry, and I think will remain on record to get justice for them. And I think so they can speak specifically on where they are with that process. Okay. Two, in terms of the city and what the city has done, I think our call now is sort of like, we accept that things could have been done better. They could have been done better before 31st August 2023. They could have been done better before today. Our plea is for the city to put together a plan and then implement it. And I think as stakeholders, both SERI is a legal organization that works with the residents of the inner city. We know that there's movements like the Inner City Federation, like the Inner City Resource Center, who work with the residents in the inner city. They are waiting to hear from them and work with them in resolving this issue. And actually the better thing for them to do would be to roll out something that applies to each and every building, so that there isn't a process where they say, because one is city-owned, we will not intervene. Or this one, because this one is privately owned, we will not be able to intervene, because then we are bound to then have more tragedies. And then lastly, on the commemoration, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I think there will be a gathering at the Usindiso Building to remember those that passed away. I think we would welcome any solidarity and any support. I think that, in fact, that solidarity and support is very important. I think one of the things that had come out in the early days of the fire was the fact that the building used to be a pass office. It used to be the place where Africans would get told whether they are worthy enough of living in the city, or get told that actually they are rejected and must go back to the homelands or to anywhere else. And so today we ask anyone who thinks that Black life is valuable, anyone who believes that cities are places that people should be able to live in even if they are poor, people who think that actually the land question, the question that needs to be resolved in this country, to meet with the justice campaign, some of the victims who will be at the Usindiso Building from 4 o'clock until 7 o'clock this evening. It's a candlelight vigil, so just bring your candle. And of course, I think in the next few days, we'll also roll out how you communicate with the campaign, how you join the campaign.